"The boards are wrong under here, Mr. Yates." The girl's voice came from inside the South Library. The room Morton Yates had not entered in 11 years, and for a moment he stood very still in the hallway outside. With his hand on the brass doorknob he had just turned for the first time since that particular autumn morning, when he had finally understood that going in there was not keeping Agnes close, but simply prolonging a conversation he would never finish. He was 64 years old. He had built Yates Capital Partners from a two-man operation above a hardware store in Hartford into one of the most respected mid-market private equity firms in New England. He had sat across negotiating tables from men twice his size and half his conscience, and he had not cried in public since his wife's funeral 17 years ago. And he had not been inside that library since the year he locked it and told his housekeeper, Dolores, to leave it. He had opened the door this evening for one reason. The North Wing renovation required the HVAC contractor to access a duct panel behind the South Library's east wall, and Dolores had asked whether Morton wanted her to handle moving the furniture. Morton had said no. He had not entirely known why. He pushed the door open now and walked in. The South Library was exactly as Agnes had left it. Two walls of built-in shelving packed with the particular organized chaos of a woman who had been a serious reader. A partner's desk near the window she had never shared, though she had let Morton sit in the smaller chair across from it on Sunday evenings when she was reviewing manuscripts for the literary foundation she ran. A large Persian rug, deep burgundy, cream, and slate, centered beneath a reading table. The rug had been a wedding gift from Agnes's parents, and Morton had walked across it, perhaps 10,000 times in the years they had lived together in this house. The girl was kneeling at the edge of the rug near the east wall, her small fingers pressed flat against the hardwood floor where the rug's fringe ended. She was perhaps 12, maybe 13. Her name was Ivy, and she was the daughter of Bet Marsh, who managed the estate's grounds and had worked for Morton since Agnes had hired her in the second year of their marriage. Ivy had been coming to the property since she was old enough to walk without falling into the flower beds. Morton had seen her many times. He had never spoken to her about anything more than a returned good morning. He crossed the room and stopped a few feet from where she was kneeling. "What is it?" Ivy did not look up immediately. She pressed her fingers more carefully along the joint where the floorboard met the baseboard, then lifted her eyes to Morton, with an expression that was not quite fear and not quite certainty, but something in between. The expression of a child who has noticed something an adult has missed and is not entirely sure she is allowed to say so. "The boards here don't sit flush," she said. "There's a gap, real small, but it's there. And the wood color is different, just a little. Like something was cut out and put back, but not sanded all the way down to match." Morton looked at the floor where she was pointing. He saw nothing at first. He crouched down slowly, the way his knees required him to now, and looked along the edge of the baseboard at the angle Ivy was looking. She was right. There was a seam, barely visible, running in a near-perfect rectangle about 12 inches wide and 18 long, where the floor had been cut and refitted. The replacement wood had darkened over time to something close to the surrounding boards, but not quite. Someone had been careful. Not careful enough. "How did you see this?" Morton asked. "The light," Ivy said. She nodded toward the single lamp Dolores had switched on when they entered, standing on the floor near the east wall while the overhead remained off. "It's coming from low. When light comes from low, it shows the edges of things. My mom says you can tell when ground is disturbed the same way, low light after rain. She taught me to look for it when we're checking the drainage tiles." Morton was quiet for a moment. "How long have you been coming to this property?" "Since I was 4, sir. I'm 13 now." "And you've never been in this room before today?" "No, sir. Mrs. Dolores said this room stays closed." She paused. "She told me and Mom to just move the chairs away from the east wall, and she'd do the rest herself, but she got a phone call, and I was already in here, and I saw the floor when I went to move the reading lamp." Morton stood. His knees ached. He looked at the rectangle in the floor for a long time without moving, the way he looked at a contract when he suspected the language had been engineered to conceal something. Agnes had died 17 years ago. Not 11, 17. He had stopped entering the library 11 years after she died, when grief had finally reorganized itself into something he could navigate around rather than through. He had locked the door that spring and told Dolores to leave it, and Dolores, who understood more about grief than most people gave her credit for, had left it. In those first 6 years, he had been in the library many times. He had sat at her desk, he had read her books, he had opened her drawers and touched her pens, the way a widower does when the house still feels inhabited. He had never noticed this seam in the floor. which meant someone had cut this panel into the floor after Agnes died. Or she had cut it before she died and had made sure it was invisible enough that he would not find it in the ordinary course of his grief. "Ivy," Morton said quietly, "step back to the doorway for me. Don't leave the room. I'm going to lift this." The girl stood and moved to the doorway, folding her hands in front of her, with the instinctive deference of a child raised by a woman who had spent her career on other people's land. Morton went to Agnes's desk and opened the narrow center drawer. Her letter opener was still there, where it had always been. He took it and returned to the seam. He worked the tip along the edge of the rectangle, gently with the patience he applied to any locked thing. He found the catch on the third try, a small brass mechanism flush set into the near end, requiring pressure at a precise point before it released. It clicked. The panel lifted on a silent hinge. Inside was a shallow cavity, perhaps 4 inches deep, lined with a scrap of the same dark felt Agnes had used to pad the interior of her desk drawers. Set into the felt, placed with the deliberate neatness of someone who had wanted them, found in exactly the right order, were 3 items. A small leather journal, narrow dark green with a clasp, the kind Agnes had always preferred. A sealed white envelope with Morton's name, written on the outside in Agnes's handwriting. Beneath them both, wrapped in a square of the blue silk she had used to store her good jewelry, a manila folder accordion thick and bound with a rubber band. Morton did not touch them immediately. He knelt on the hardwood beside the open cavity and looked at the 3 items the way he looked at balance sheets, when he suspected the numbers had been telling a different story than the one he'd been shown. "Mr. Yates." Ivy's voice from the doorway was very quiet. "Do you want me to get Mrs. Dolores?" "No, not yet." He paused. "Ivy, do you know what a witness is?" "Yes, sir. Someone who sees something and can say they saw it." Morton looked back at the girl. "I'd like you to stay in the room while I go through these. You don't have to look, but I want someone here who saw this opened." Ivy nodded and stayed where she was. Morton took the white envelope first. He held it in both hands for a moment before opening it. He had not seen Agnes's handwriting on anything in 17 years, except the inscription inside the copy of Middlemarch she had given him the Christmas before she died. He recognized her writing the way he recognized her voice in certain dreams, all at once, without having to think about it. He opened the envelope. Inside were 2 sheets of paper folded together. The first was a handwritten letter on Agnes's personal stationery, the pale gray stock she had used for correspondence she considered important. The second was a single typed page dense with numbers. He read the letter first. "Morton, I am writing this on a Thursday evening in March, and I do not know when you will find it. I hope it is, because you finally decided to fix the HVAC and not for the other reason. If it is the other reason, please read the folder before you do anything else, and please do not call Duncan before you have read all of it. I found the first transfer by accident 8 months ago. I was reviewing the quarterly statements for the Weston Bridge gift, and I noticed a disbursement from the charitable trust that I didn't recognize. I asked our accountant about it, and he said Duncan had authorized a routing correction. I did not believe him. I began to look more carefully. What I found is in the folder. I am not a financial person, Morton, but I was careful, and I had help from someone I trust, and I believe what is in the folder is accurate. Duncan has been moving money from your personal trust. Not the firm, not the charitable accounts, your personal trust. The one your father left you. He has been doing it in small amounts, structured to avoid the reporting thresholds, for at least 6 years. I do not know how much happened before that. The total I was able to document is just over $3 million. I am going to tell you on Saturday. I wanted to have everything organized first. I wanted to be sure. If something has happened to me between now and Saturday, please find Percy Whitman and give him the folder directly. Do not go through Duncan's office. Do not use the firm's attorneys. I love you. I am sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I had more time. Agnes. March 14. The letter was dated 17 years, and 4 days before the morning, Agnes had driven her car off Millbrook Road in an early spring rain and been found by a passing truck driver in the creek bed 40 feet below. The coroner had ruled it an accident. The road was known to be slick in wet weather. Agnes had not been wearing her seatbelt, which had surprised people who knew her because she was precise about such things. The investigation had taken 2 weeks. There had been no question at the time. Morton stood up from the floor. He stood very still in the middle of the South Library with the letter in his hand and the open cavity at his feet, and the full weight of what Agnes had written settled through him. Layer by layer, the way water moves through stone. She had been afraid. She had hidden evidence in their own home because she was afraid of what would happen when she spoke. And on the Saturday, she had planned to tell him. She had not made it to Saturday. He had thought for 17 years that he had lost his wife to an accident on a wet road. He was standing now in a room that introduced the possibility that he had lost her to something else entirely. He did not allow himself to go further than possibility. He was a man who had spent 40 years distinguishing between what evidence showed and what it suggested, and he understood that the distance between those two things was where the worst mistakes lived. He folded the letter along its original creases and put it back in the envelope. Then he turned to look at Ivy. She was standing exactly where he had asked her to stand, her hands still folded, her eyes on the middle distance. The way a well-raised child holds herself when an adult is going through something she understands is not hers to look at directly. "Ivy," Morton said, "there is a telephone on the desk. It has a green cover. Would you bring it to me, please?" She crossed the room and brought it without looking at anything she hadn't already seen. Morton dialed from memory a number he had kept in his head for 31 years the way he kept the combination to his first safe, and the line picked up on the third ring. Percy Whitman was 72 years old. He had been a federal prosecutor before Morton first hired him in 1994, and in the 31 years since, he had never worked for Yates Capital Partners, never taken a fee from the firm's accounts, and never been in a room with Duncan Farr if he could help it. Not because he disliked the man, but because Morton had asked him years ago to stay separate, a circuit breaker, the kind of precaution a careful man keeps in place against the day something cuts the main line. "Percy," Morton said, "I need you at the house tonight. Come through the service road, not the front gate. Park behind the carriage barn. Don't call my office. Don't contact Duncan Farr for any reason between now and when you walk through my door." A pause. Percy Whitman did not do anything quickly, but he did it completely. "How long do I have?" "However long it takes you to drive here without being seen." 40 minutes. Morton set the phone down. He looked at the manila folder still sitting in the cavity. He looked at the journal. He turned back to the girl. "Ivy, I'm going to ask you to stay a little longer. When my attorney arrives, I want you to tell him exactly what you saw this evening and exactly how you saw it. What you were doing, where the light was, what you noticed. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Have you ever given a formal statement before? To anyone official?" "No, sir. It simply means telling the truth in order, the way it happened, without adding what you think it means. Only what you observed." He paused. "The truth, even when it would have been easy not to notice." Ivy was quiet for a moment. "My mom says noticing is a responsibility. She says once you've seen something, you can't unsee it, and pretending you didn't is the same as a lie." Morton looked at the girl for a long time. "Your mother is right," he said. He went back to the cavity and lifted the folder onto Agnes's desk. Inside were 41 pages organized in the careful way Agnes had organized everything she took seriously, chronological, tabbed, annotated in her small, precise handwriting where the numbers required explanation. Account statements, routing records, a memo from a secondary accountant whose name Morton recognized as someone Agnes had trusted, and a single-page summary in Agnes's own hand that laid out in plain language what she had found. Duncan Farr had been moving money from Morton's personal trust since the spring of the year Morton's father died and left him the trust. He had used the complexity of the estate settlement as cover in the early years, routing transfers through subaccounts legitimate enough to pass casual review. In the years after, Agnes had written with a directness that made Morton close his eyes. For one moment he had relied on Morton's grief. "He knew you wouldn't check," she had written. "He knew you were in no condition to check. He has been counting on that for 6 years. Please don't let him count on it for 7. She had signed her initials at the bottom in the way she always signed informal documents, AY, with the period she always put after the Y. Morton sat down in Agnes's chair. He had not sat in it since the week after her funeral. It was lower than he remembered, or he was different in it now. He sat with his hands flat on the leather and breathed. From the doorway came the quiet sound of Ivy shifting her weight, and then stillness again. "Ivy," Morton said without lifting his head, "come here." She crossed the room and stood at the corner of the desk. "The woman whose desk this is." He stopped. He tried again. "She left something here for me to find 17 years ago, and she didn't have the chance to tell me it was here. She was trying to protect something, and she trusted that someone would eventually see what she couldn't leave me in any other way." He was not explaining this for procedural reasons. He was explaining it because a child in the room had helped him find something important, and she deserved to know what it was. She was trying to protect the truth until someone came along who knew how to look at the edges of things. Ivy looked at the desk, at the pages spread across it, and then at Morton. Her expression was the particular expression of a child who understands more than the adult expects and has chosen not to say so. She must have trusted the house, Ivy said quietly, to know the right person would notice. Morton looked at her. She trusted that someone eventually would, he said. She just didn't know who. She sounds like she was very brave, to do all that and not tell anyone. Morton was quiet for a long time. Yes, he said finally, she was. 43 minutes later, Percy Whitman came through the kitchen door with his overcoat over his arm and the small leather briefcase Morton had seen exactly 4 times in their 31 years together. The briefcase that came out only for matters Percy described as requiring full presence of mind. He came into the South Library and looked at the open cavity in the floor, at the papers spread on Agnes's desk, and at Morton sitting in Agnes's chair with his hands folded on the green journal he had not yet opened. He set the briefcase down. "Tell me," he said. Morton told him in 15 minutes. He left nothing out. Percy read the letter, Agnes's summary, and 7 of the 41 supporting pages, selected with the efficiency of a man who knows what a case needs and where to find it. When he finished, he set the pages down. "Agnes came to see me," Percy said, "the winter before she died. She asked me a technical question about reporting thresholds for trust disbursements under federal fiduciary law. I answered her. I didn't understand why she was asking." He paused. "I understand now." Morton nodded slowly. "I need 3 things from you tonight," Morton said. "A notarized record of everything in this room, taken with Ivy as witness, with her account of what she observed and how she found it. A hold on every account Duncan has signing authority over, filed at the opening of business tomorrow. And the name of a forensic accountant you trust personally, no one who has ever billed the firm." "I have someone," Percy said. "She's thorough and she keeps quiet." "Good." Percy opened the briefcase. He produced a recorder, a pad of affidavit forms, and the heavy notarial seal he had carried in the same pouch since the year Morton first hired him. He set them on Agnes's desk with the unhurried care of a man who had learned long ago that the most important documents in any matter were the ones that could not be rushed. He looked at Ivy, standing by the window with her hands folded. "Young lady," he said, "my name is Mr. Whitman. I'm going to ask you to describe what you saw this evening, in your own words, starting from the moment you walked into this room. Take your time. Tell me only what you observed, not what you concluded. Just what you saw." Ivy nodded. "The lamp was on the floor because we were moving furniture. My mom taught me that low light shows the edges of disturbed ground the way rain does. When I looked toward the east wall, I saw a seam in the floorboards that didn't match the surrounding wood. The grain was slightly different. The joint was too clean. Natural settling doesn't leave seams that precise. I pressed along the baseboard and felt a slight give near one end. That's when I told Mr. Yates." Percy wrote for a long time. He asked 4 follow-up questions, all of them precise, and Ivy answered each one with the same careful economy. The habit of separating what she'd observed from what she'd concluded that Morton had recognized the moment she first described the seam. When Percy read the statement back and asked if it was accurate, Ivy said yes, without hesitating. When he explained she would be signing a legal document for the first time, she said she understood. "What does it mean to sign one?" Percy asked. "Not testing, just confirming." "It means what I've said is true and I stand behind it," Ivy said, even when it would have been easier not to notice. Percy Whitman looked at Morton across the desk. Something passed between the 2 men that required no words. Then Percy uncapped his pen and set the affidavit in front of Ivy, and the girl signed her name in a clean, even hand. What followed over the next several weeks moved with the patient, deliberate weight that only a skilled attorney and a thorough accountant can bring to a matter waiting 17 years to be examined in the right light. Duncan Farr was not arrested dramatically. Percy did not believe in noise where paper would serve better. By the end of the first week, every account Duncan managed on Morton's behalf had been frozen by a court order he had not anticipated. By the end of the second week, the forensic accountant Percy retained had traced the transfers back 11 years. 5 further than Agnes had been able to document, to a total just under $9 million, moved in structured increments through 7 sub-accounts, all of them legitimate on their face. None of them authorized by Morton. The investigation into Agnes's death was reopened at Percy's request, quietly, through a channel Morton was never required to navigate personally. The accident reconstruction specialist who reviewed the original file noted 2 things not part of the initial report. The seatbelt in Agnes's car had shown evidence of interference at the clasp mechanism, and a transfer of $200,000 from one of Duncan's personal accounts had been made the afternoon of March 15th. the day after Agnes had written the letter Morton found in the floor, and 4 days before she died on the road. The specialist's report used words like consistent with and cannot be excluded and warrants further examination. It reached no conclusion. Morton read it on a Tuesday morning in Percy's office, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the folder with Agnes's papers. He did not speak of it again. He understood that some questions, asked too late, become a different kind of answer. He had the one he needed. Duncan Farr pleaded guilty to 14 of 22 counts of wire fraud and breach of fiduciary duty the following spring. He was 61 years old at sentencing. He received 8 years in a federal facility and a restitution order that his own counsel acknowledged would consume whatever remained of him. Morton did not attend the hearing. He had said what he needed to say in a letter he gave Percy 3 weeks before the plea, delivered to Duncan's counsel, with instructions that it be read before any agreement was signed. The contents were never made part of the public record and never will be. The recovered funds, the full $9 million, plus interest computed from the date of the first unauthorized transfer, Morton placed into a foundations established in Agnes's name the following autumn. Its mission was stated simply: educational scholarships for children whose parents worked in the skilled trades, in grounds maintenance, in domestic service, in the back offices and carriage sheds and garden sheds of the estates and institutions of New England. The first scholarship was awarded at the foundation's inaugural dinner in December. It went to a 13-year-old girl named Ivy Marsh for full tuition at the preparatory school, 8 miles from the property where her mother tended the grounds. Bet Marsh thanked Morton for 30 seconds at the dinner in a voice that didn't shake, which Morton understood was the most she would allow herself in public, and which was more than enough. Ivy enrolled in January and was quiet her first semester in the way that careful people are quiet in new rooms, watching the edges, learning the light, understanding what sat flush and what did not before deciding what to say about it. By her second year, she was first in her class in mathematics. By the time she was 16, she told Morton over Sunday teas that she wanted to study forensic architecture, the discipline concerned with what buildings conceal, where structures have been altered, and what the edges of things can tell you about what has been done to them and why. Morton set down his cup and looked at her. "Your mother taught you that," he said, "about the edges." "She taught me about ground," Ivy said. "You taught me about rooms." Morton kept the South Library open after that. He had the floor panel properly repaired by a craftsman Percy knew, one who matched the grain so precisely that Morton could not find the seam afterward even when he looked. He hung a new photograph of Agnes above her desk, one taken in the garden, in the light she had always looked best in, and he spent certain evenings in her chair, reading the books she had left behind, which had been waiting for him, it turned out, without impatience. There are houses that keep their secrets for a very long time. The secrets are kept not by the people who own them, but by the people who maintain them, who know where the ground drains, which floors have settled unevenly, where the light falls low in the late afternoon and shows you the edges of things that were never meant to be found. Pay attention to those people. Learn what they have learned about the places you believe you know completely. Because the thing that has been waiting longest to be seen is almost never in the place you think to look. It is in the floor, under the rug, in the room you stopped entering, because the grief of entering it was more than you could carry. And sometimes all it takes is a 13-year-old girl, with her mother's habit of watching the way light falls on disturbed ground, to notice what 17 years of love and loss had made you stop looking for. The truth, Ivy had said, even when it would have been easy not to notice. That, Morton thought in the long quiet of Agnes's library, was exactly right.